Diane from Sister Mate asked me if I want to make tights using her instructions, and I immediately took on the challenge. If you haven't watched the previous video, you can go and check it out. I'm showing how to knit the test square, how to take your measurements, and how to generate a file to make the tights your size. These are the tights for my doll. I'm making those size because it shows all the steps to make them and allows the video to be more interesting. Don't forget that you can find all the needed links in the description below. You can use any knitting machine with a ribbing attachment. I will be demonstrating on the passap. Let's read the instructions together. This is at the top of the page. My stockinette stitch test swatch has 7.5 stitches to an inch and 12.5 rows to an inch. This is automatically generated. First, we have to prepare the machine to knit a tube open on the right side. The test swatch is knitted with a stitch size 5, so we have to use stitch size 5. The tension on the mast is set to 4. On the passap you have to rotate this green knob to regulate the tension. Now let's move to the second line. Cast on 18 stitches on each bed, then knit open tube for 14 passes. We have to raise 18 needles on each bed, make the cast on, then knit 14 rows. Easy peasy. The number in purple in the right column is showing how many needles you must have in working position on each bed when you finish all the operations in the row of text before moving to the next row of text. Let's make the cast on. First, on the passap, rotate the racking handle in its upper position. If you have a different machine, use the cast on method appropriate for your machine. Raise 18 needles on the front bed, 9 to the left and 9 to the right side of 0. Place the edge springs and make sure the latches are closed. Now raise the opposite 18 needles on the back bed and place the edge springs on the last working ones. You can see up close. On the front bed, raise pushers in 1-to-1 division and put them in working position. Then raise pushers in 1-to-1 division on the back bed and put them in resting position. Set the front lock to BX. For the size yarn I am using, I will set the stitch size to 1 and press the right arrow key. Set the back lock the same way, BX stitch size 1 and press the right arrow key. Insert the black strippers and take the yarn. You have to use the same yarn as for the test swatch. Now knit 2 rows. On both locks, increase the stitch size to 4. On the front bed, raise the rest of the pushers and level them with the others. They must be in resting position. Now raise the rest of the pushers on the back bed and put them in working position. Tap on the needles to tighten the yarn and knit 2 rows. If you are using more than one strand of yarn, you may want to wax the end to achieve a nice looking cast on. It should look like this. Clear the row counter and increase the stitch size to 5 on both sides of the lock. That is the stitch size for the main knitting. Now, according to the instructions, I have to knit to row count 14. Use the orange ruler and tap on the needles to tighten the yarn after each row. By the way, when the instructions say you have to knit to any row count, that is a hint to knit without resetting the row counter. So I cleared the row counter once after making the cast on. After you knit the first few rows, you can continue without tapping on the needles. Let's continue reading. At this point, you can choose to rehang the piece to sew the casing. You can knit 2 rows of contrasting color yarn or mark the row to sew it later. I will use a lifeline, which I will pull out after sewing the casing. I don't have a slick cord, so I will wax 2 strands of contrasting color yarn, and after sewing I will easily pull them out. Thread them into a needle, carefully lower the front bed and attach weights on each side of the knitting. The weight will hold the stitches on the needles. I'm using the orange tool to find the stitch, then I will pass the needle through it. The lifeline must pass right under the needles, don't put it into the hooks because the machine will knit it off. At first I was inserting the needle sideways, but then I found a really fast way to insert the lifeline. I'm just slightly opening the stitch, then I'm pushing the needle towards the front bed. You can see up close. I'm using only one lifeline, but your tights will be bigger, so you may need to use one on the front and one on the back bed. Place the edge springs on the last needles and raise the front bed. Put the ends of the lifeline between the beds of the machine. Tap on the needles to tighten the yarn and knit to the next row count. In my case it's row count 74. Don't clear the row counter. Now we have to make increases at the shown row counts. Then we will have 21 needles in working position on each bed. On the passap, raise one needle to the left and one pusher under the needle. Then do the same on the back bed. Make sure to align the pusher with others. Now we have to knit to the next row count. Raise one needle and one pusher on each bed and move the edge springs. Now knit to the next row count. Repeat the same steps, raise one needle and one pusher on each bed and move the edge springs. Now knit to the next row count. Now we are on the next line of the instructions. We have to change to closed tube knitting and decrease one stitch on the open side on each row count. Then we will have only 15 needles in working position on each bed. To knit tubular on the passap, we have to set both locks to CX, press both 0 keys to disengage the arrow keys. On both beds, put all pushers out of working position. Now take the double-decker tool, remove the edge springs, take the rightmost stitches and move them one needle in. Place the edge springs on the last working needles and make sure to put the empty needles out of working position. Now knit to the next row count, in my case it's row count 110. Now we have to repeat these steps to make the other decreases. According to the passap manual, you can make the decreases no matter on which side of the knitting the lock is. I started to make them with the lock on the right side, so I will continue this way until I make all of them. Diane says she likes to make her decreases while the lock is on the opposite side. If her lock ends on the side of the decreases, she knits to the other side. She finds that she drops stitches less often. This is your choice to make. Sometimes you might need to knit one additional row to make the decreases with the lock on the same side. I have to make decreases the same way when the row counter is at rows 122, 134, 146 and 158. Now the row counter is at row 158 and I'm making the last decrease. Then we have to move on to the next line. If you want leggings to the knee, you have to knit to row count 177, then make a cast off. I want full length tights, so I have to continue knitting and decrease one stitch at row count 195 and one on row 214. At row count 195 the lock will be on the left side of the machine. If you have started to make the decreases on the opposite side of the lock, this is fine, but I started to make them on the side of the lock, so I will need one additional row. Repeat the same procedure to make the decreases. Make sure the empty needles are out of working position. Sistermate has agreed to give you a special discount on a purchase from her Etsy store. Link is below. Use the code ArtOfClay. Now knit to the next row count and make the second decrease. While I'm making this decrease, you can like the video and leave me a comment. I love to hear from you. If I want to make the leggings to the ankle, I have to make the cast off at row count 233. I will ignore that line and I will knit to the next row count. In my case, this is row count 252. Now you can continue knitting tubular to row count 292 to make no heel tights, or you may set the machine to knit only on the front bed and form the heel. I need to decrease 3 stitches at each end to form the heel for my tights. So now I will show you how to do it on the passap. Set the front lock to BX and the back lock to GX. Raise pushers in working position under all working needles on the front bed. To have less holes in the heel area, this would be where you can take the purl bump from the front end stitches and add them to each of the end stitches on the back. Put one pusher on the opposite side of the lock in resting position and knit one row. Then repeat the same steps until you have 3 pushers in resting position on each side. When you put the third pusher in resting position, raise one pusher on the side of the lock and knit one row. Continue raising one pusher on the side of the lock until there is one pusher left on the right side. Then put all pushers out of working position and set the machine to knit tubular. On the passap you need to set both locks to CX. Now we have to continue knitting tubular until we reach the next row count. In my case it's row count 292. Now at each row count below we have to make the decreases for the toe. At this point you can remove the edge springs. Take the double-decker tool. At each end on each bed move the last 2 stitches 1 needle in. You know how to do it already. Now knit to the next row count and make the decreases again. I will leave the whole process so you can see everything. I already told you that all the links will be in the description, but do you want to ask me anything? Don't be afraid to leave me a comment. Also, you can send me a photo of your tights on my Facebook page. I know that you are not skipping through the video, so I will share one secret with you. I love to finish the toe section by sewing off the stitches in a circular way. As you can see on my sheet, I have only 5 stitches left on each pad after making the final decrease, but you may have more stitches left depending on the size of your foot. If you have 14 stitches left after making the last decrease, you can continue decreasing the same way until you have 4-6 stitches left on each bed. If you are worried that this will change the final results, don't be, it won't happen. The calculations are perfect, but you can knit 2 rows after each decrease instead of 4. After you make the last decrease, knit only 2 rows. Then take the yarn from the lock and cut it. Thread it into the double-eye bodkin tool and sew off the stitches. Start taking the stitches on the front bed from right to left. Then start taking the stitches on the back bed from left to right. Now I have knitted the first half of the tights. Do you like it? To make the second half you have to repeat the same steps but make the cast on open at left and do all the increases and decreases on the left side. Or you can repeat the same process and make the heel using the pushers on the back bed. If you want to make heel-less tights or leggings, you can repeat the same steps exactly as you did on the first leg. Now you have to sew both halves together. Here is the lifeline. Now I will show you how to sew the casing. You have to take the stitch right below the lifeline and sew it to the top. Leave a small hole to insert the elastic band. Now you can pull out the lifelines and you have a perfectly sewn casing. I will use this small safety pin to string the elastic band. Finally, you have to sew both ends of the elastic band and close the hole. That's the easy part. And this is the final result. They are the perfect fit. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day and see you in my next video.